How's it going, guys? I'm Jeremy, and today I'll tell you about my bike trip through Pakistan. If you're going to do a world trip, especially on bicycle or motorcycle, you got to go up the Karakorum highway. It's possibly the most beautiful road in the world, but it's not without its dangers, of course. There's been a lot of Islamic insurgencies up in the north that kind of cross in between Afghanistan and Pakistan and stuff like that. I know I went to the Marriott in Islamabad to buy alcohol, and 2 months later that place was blown up. And I also stayed in a hotel in the same town that bin Laden was in. So definitely could be dangerous for Americans, but if you're going to do a worldwide cycling trip, you got to do the Karakorum Highway. It is amazing. So here's the story of my trip. So this is in 2008, which was obviously, there was quite heavy fighting in Afghanistan around that time still. I think the worst year was 2010. And so, yeah, it was definitely an unstable time. It was only about a year and a half before that Benazir Bhutto, the president, the female prime minister at the time, was shot and killed. And so the borders were actually closed for several months. I had heard of some cyclists who had tried to go through and the borders were closed and they couldn't get in and stuff like that. And so definitely a little bit of an unstable time. As I mentioned, yeah, that Marriott was blown up. About 58 people got killed, and several hundred injured, and all kinds of small skirmishes, especially up in the north where I was headed. That area is where you have the Pashtun people and some other tribes, which half of that area is in Pakistan and half of it's in Afghanistan. And many of those people are known to be basically the Taliban. So it's definitely not super safe for an American. But generally, I haven't heard of many incidents of attacking like a cyclist or this kind of thing. I'm sure they have bigger fish to fry. With that being said, there is always some dangers. But I figured, I really wanted to see this route. Definitely one of the best in the world. And so this was the third part of a long-distance biking trip I was on. I started in Thailand, went through Southeast Asia, and was in China for a while because I had an accident. I broke my femur and stayed there for a year and a half. And then I went through Tibet to Nepal, stayed there 5 months through winter, and then went through India, and then got to Pakistan. And this border crossing doesn't really have any people crossing it because of the sensitive conflicts between Pakistan and India for so long. It's pretty hard actually for Indians to get tourist visas to enter Pakistan. So obviously most borders with huge populations, you have thousands of people, tens of thousands, and there's hardly anyone there. And they actually at the Amritsar to Punjab, to this crossing I went through, you actually have a pretty cool marching procession kind of ceremony they do every evening around 5 or 6. I didn't stick around because I wanted to get to Lahore, the second biggest city, before dark. So I got through there, and actually it was kind of funny. I do remember the guy mentioning oh, where are you from? And I've had a lot of people say Germany, England, maybe Russia, could even be Spain, Canada, whatever. He said, "Are you from Japan?" I was like, okay, that's random, but no, I'm not from Japan. And so, yeah, I just had the 25 Ks to Lahore, and I already arranged through Couchsurfing to stay with this woman and her brother and their family, basically, which was cool. I was there for a couple days. Got my bike fixed up and ready to go because I knew I'd be, headed up to the mountains and everything, and I needed to get everything straightened out. And Lahore actually had quite a lot of nice sights to see. There's plenty of amazing mosques and museums and different things to see. So it's not a bad spot to spend 2 or 3 days, but it is quite polluted and quite busy. And also the thing is, it's just like I mentioned in the video about Nepal, they have load shedding, which is basically there's so many people in the country, they only have so much power. So they have to turn off the power several hours a day or in the evening. And this was already, I think, late May or sometime in May, and it's already real hot in Pakistan, especially in the south, like Lahore. And you're just asleep, and you just wake up sweating, and it's like the fan that was on shuts off in the middle of the night. In Lahore, a lot of the people will sleep up on their roofs at nighttime because it gets so hot in the houses. when I was in Pakistan, I also kind of wanted to fit in more. So I bought kind of the local clothing that the guys wore. I think it's called a Shalwar kameez. And actually, I did fit in, maybe not like right in Lahore, lower Pakistan, but up in those tribal areas and up way in the north, there's a lot of people who could pass as like Caucasian. Like they could pass as someone from, Germany or the UK or something like that. So people even occasionally would ask me, they'd be like, "Oh, are you from Pakistan?" And so, yeah, it was probably better for me to try to like fit in a little more. Not just for safety, but it's kind of fun sometimes just to kind of like, try to blend in a little bit more. My first impressions were all pretty positive up until there and the next few days. Everyone was super friendly. They would ask me what I thought of India, a lot of them, because I had just come from there. And I said, yeah, it was okay, but they were a little bit of annoying. And they were like, you could have whatever you want in our shop. They're like, they're really, because, their opinion of India and India's opinion of Pakistan is pretty negative. And I was telling the truth. I mean, in India, it was great. But a lot of the people, like, I drive through and everyone's like, hello, hello. And they kind of, I don't like make people making like silly sounds. Like just say hello or whatever. Or don't say this like high pitch, hello, hello. So in Pakistan, no one would do that. Obviously, they don't have the amount of tourists that India does, which might be some of the reason. But yeah, people just come up and, shake my hand. How are you doing? Sir, where are you from? Great. Do you need help with it? So everyone's like quite calm and like would shake your hand and have like a very civilized, nice conversation. Where India, it was a little bit intense and a little bit annoying at times. And so Pakistan in that regard was much better. So of course, because of the war in Afghanistan and everything like that, obviously people don't have a great opinion of the States. But it's funny because, it's really interesting what people like about the United States. And of course, I had like one guy in Lahore come up and he's like, oh my God, I love Hollywood. And he's like just going on and on about movies and super excited, and probably one of the most excited guys I've ever seen in my life. But yeah, you get down into a lot of these rural areas, not just in India, but I mean, when you're in Cambodia, when you're in a lot of developed countries. And one of the funny things they really like is the WWE or WWF, basically the fake wrestling. So it's really funny that people like America because of their fake wrestling. Thank God for that, right? I think, one of the guys, the really big guys, I forget the guy's name, maybe Khan, is a Pakistani guy. So maybe that's why it was more popular in Pakistan. But anyway, yeah, I left Lahore and headed up to Islamabad. That was only 3 or 4 days. It was relatively flat. And I stayed in Islamabad for like a whole week, which I usually wouldn't do, but I need to get my Chinese visa, which takes 4 days. And then I ended up getting my Kyrgyzstan visa, which takes 2 or 3 days. And so I was actually really lucky to even get the Chinese visa because that was right at the 2008 Olympics. And they weren't easily giving tourist visas, like unless you're maybe going to the Olympics or something specific. I told the guy I was going to like my friend's wedding in Chinese. And so I luckily got that visa. And in Islamabad, it was funny. I actually stayed in a campground, which is pretty random, but they have like a campground right in the middle of the city. And there was a Swedish guy there, a Mexican guy, Raphael, a Canadian guy, Mike, and a couple older German couple who they stayed there like 6 months. They drove their RV down from Germany there and like stayed there for like half the year because it was so cheap, which is so random to me, but it's cool, whatever. The Swedish guy was really funny because he'd ask him, oh, where are you from? And he's the guy who'd give like a 5-minute explanation or 10 minutes of, it's like very philosophical, right? He spent a lot of time in India, even overstayed his visa, which I don't think you need to do, and was in jail there and stuff. And really funny character. And the one guy, Mike, had kind of a funny story too, because he had come back, with like fried rice or something like that. And the guard, because in India and Pakistan, they eat with their hands. And so you could just see him come back. He's just about to eat his food. And the one guard walked over and just like put his hands in there. And it's like, and you could just look at this dude's face. And he's like, I'm not going to eat that. It's only probably like $1 or $2. So he just went and got something else. That was kind of funny. But yeah, we hung out there for a few days, but it was a good way to kill time. And we had a whole week to, wait on visas or hang out. So it's not like we're going to go to some cool clubs in Lahore or something like that. So we would just hang out there. It was probably the safest, the best spot. Like I mentioned, you could go over and get alcohol. you could spend a little bit more and get it, or you can actually get a permit to buy alcohol to say like you're a Christian. And so I actually went and found this little like office, which is actually like outside in kind of a bazaar or something. It's kind of random, but this guy wrote the thing up basically saying I was a Christian and I went to get booze. And so, you know, we drank there a little bit and probably had pot or whatever. And it was funny, one of the other guards even came by and he asked for some alcohol. And then he mixed it with Sprite, and I was like, dude, that's what like little girls do. You shouldn't be doing that. It was kind of funny. And actually, if you do bike through Pakistan as a foreigner, once in a while people will stop you. And they're like, hey man, do you have any whiskey or anything? And of course, it's hard for them to get alcohol, so they'll try to ask some foreigners if they have anything. So the other funny thing too is you're sitting in that campground, you know, you could hear the call to prayer and stuff like that, you know, 5 times a day or whatever. But you could actually hear on the megaphone the guys in the mosque giving their sermon or whatever it's called basically. And I'll tell you, it didn't sound very good. Like they definitely seemed like they were very angry, and I could hear stuff America. So it's like camping in this campground next to a mosque where they're like probably telling people to kill Americans probably isn't the best. But anyway, we were fine. And, you know, after I got my visas and stuff, we parted ways. And I headed off on my bike up into the mountains from there. And I guess it was probably the next day or two, I was in Abbottabad. Small town, maybe 250,000 people. And I had no idea, but 2 years later in the news, that's where they actually ended up getting bin Laden. And so that was crazy to think, like, you know, it's a relatively small city. And I remember around that time I was having some problems with my bikes, and I asked some people for help, like in bike shops. But that would be weird if I had like a flat tire or some issue, and like I went to ring the doorbell and bin Laden comes to the door. You know, obviously this area didn't get much tourism since 9/11 and the war in Afghanistan. So it's a shame because that really must have really damaged the tourism, even till today. I don't know how like Pakistan is with tourism. I guess now that the U.S. has left Afghanistan with the Taliban taking over, I don't know if that helps tourism more or not. But yeah, they used to get quite a bit, like not as much as India, but before 9/11, I think it was still quite a popular spot. Because I had met a bunch of tour guides, and they had mentioned that you'd see like 20, 30 tour guides, and there's only like, you know, 10 or 20 tourists in an area. So probably the main thing people are going for where they're making a bunch of money is people going up hiking like K2 and stuff like that would be pretty popular. I saw some Jeep tours and other people going up. So after Abbottabad, you kind of start to get up to like a little bit higher mountains. And I actually tried to take a right, which goes more to Kashmir, and it reconnects to Karakorum Highway. And they wouldn't let me through, because you needed to basically have a signed release from your embassy saying you're allowed to go to Kashmir, because obviously it's a sensitive area between India and Pakistan. And so I had to basically go up way over a mountain in the dark, super steep, to get back on the road I was trying to get to. And then a couple days later, you head into the Indus Kohistan. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. And that's basically like kind of the Pashtun area, which half of it's in Afghanistan, half of it's in Pakistan. And those are the really conservative, like Orthodox Muslims, basically. And there's absolutely no women outside. If you do see women, not only are they completely clothed, but even their eyes have kind of like a screen over them. So yeah, like I'd see maybe a woman like get out of a car and go into the hotel room, but just all guys around, which look pretty rough dudes. Like I'd seen a couple of guys getting some scuffles and stuff, so definitely some rough characters, but generally everyone was pretty nice. I did have maybe once or twice where people were a little negative towards me because I was American. One time I went to a gun shop just to kind of look around for the hell of it, and you know, I said hi, and he's like, where are you from? And I was like, the States, and he's like, you know, kind of like, you're not very welcome, or maybe it was just dirty look, I'm not sure. And then there was another time where I was like in some small town or something, and there was a couple younger guys, probably about my age, like 20s or 30s, and an old guy, and he was saying how he loved bin Laden and this kind of thing, and the other two guys were like, this guy's an idiot, you know. So I'm sure secretly, you know, obviously there was more people who probably did like that, kind of like bin Laden or something, but, you know, they weren't going to like preach it to me or anything. I did have one time I was a little bit nervous around a guy, and it wasn't because he was very Islamic or something like that, or a fundamentalist. It was actually because I could tell he was kind of jealous of my situation, because he was like, you know, he's a journalist, he's in a small town, He doesn't have many options. He didn't seem to be into Islam at all. And, it's difficult. Like, here I am with an American passport. I can travel around the world. I can make more money. I have much more opportunities, obviously. And here he is, stuck in this, like, little town and just no opportunities or anything like that. And that made me feel a little paranoid, because I was like, you know what? Someone could hurt you or do something out of, like, jealousy or spite. So that was a little weird. And actually, it was around this time, before I got to even Kohistan, a lot of the police would, come in or come to the hotel and check on me. And eventually, even for a few days, I would have kind of like a police escort, either like a car or a motorcycle or something like that. So they didn't really even want me talking to all these people in public, like in a restaurant or different things. And so, yeah, a couple of those nights, I didn't even stay in the hotel. I stayed at a police station. And even those guys were from, like, lower Pakistan. And they didn't even want to be up in those areas. They thought it was, like, kind of backward and dangerous and stuff like that. And even in the morning, I remember I was having breakfast and stuff. And you could hear shots were fired pretty close by. I was, oh, what's going on? And I didn't know if people were doing like target practice or something. He's like, oh no, a baby was just born. So I had to be, somewhat concerned going through that area. And it was funny because that guy took off on a motorcycle to kind of escort me. Not like one guy on a motorcycle would do much. And I think he only got about a kilometer outside the town where, he might have been a little ahead of me, so I biked up to him and he's trying to kickstart it for like 5 minutes. And I got on and I actually started it for him. And he went with me for maybe another 3 kilometers, and he couldn't start it again. And so I was like, man, I'm okay. Just go back to town, because I don't think we're going to be able to take on the Taliban anytime soon. In that Pashtun area is some of the highest illiteracy rates in the world, I think, or in Asia anyway. And the girls can't go to school. Some of the NGOs and people try to, like, we'll give you, like, some oil every month and food if you allow, your girls to go to school, that kind of thing. And they would until they got what they needed, and then they wouldn't send the girls to school. And I don't even know if the boys went to school. I mean, it seemed really kind of undeveloped. But needless to say, I mean, certainly quite beautiful. I guess if you really were worried about your safety in that area, you could, go from like Abbottabad or one of those towns up towards Gilgit if you were really worried about your security or something like that. But I don't think I've heard of any, like, kidnappings or any big things over the years. It could happen, I'm not sure. And so, yeah, you keep going up that highway. There's some areas where it's pretty much a desert and pretty hot. This was, I guess, May. And you've even got some old engravings on, like, some of the rocks that are supposed to be several hundred or a few thousand years old or something like that. So really cool, really pretty, and it just gets better and better as you keep going on. I did have some kids throwing rocks at me. Sometimes they were above me or in different locations and throwing rocks. I'd read about that, actually. And, you should just ignore them. They obviously are trying to get a reaction out of you. So that's half of me. And then the other half is like, a child, no matter where you're at in the world, or even a woman, a man, no human being should throw rocks at people. So a couple times I'd run over and I'd, smack their hat off or whatever. It's not like the parents cared. I mean, it's like they shouldn't be doing that, right? And so you will have that if you're cycling through that area. Some of the kids are a little rowdy. I guess you could just ignore it if you can, because there's nothing you could really do. And then once you're getting up towards Gilgit, that gets a little better. North of Gilgit is the Hunza Valley. And that type of Islam is like the Ismaili, which is like supposed to be like a much more progressive sect of Islam. So you're basically going from the most conservative type of Islam to like the most progressive, I guess. And the kids, and you can tell because in that area you could see women walking around freely. They irrigated all the areas, and it had such a different vibe. Where like, the other spot was just a bunch of like kind of angry meatheads, and here you had just this like really colorful, nice, like happy type vibe. And yeah, the people were super nice, and the young guys, we had some Hunza wine with some like college kids, and of course, like most college kids are more liberal and stuff, so they're like F, these Islamicists and these guys with these huge beards, these idiots, and so yeah, it was kind of a breath of fresh air. And I met a few other foreigners that were up there from like Germany and Holland and Japan. And I met up with them a couple different times as I kind of moved north, and so that was cool. And the views around those cities up there before you get to China were just epic. Unfortunately, I didn't do much hiking or anything like that. And then, yeah, when you get up towards the China border, actually, you can't bike to the border, unfortunately. Things might have changed now, but they had a requirement where you basically have to take a van like 80 kilometers to the border and like another 100 kilometers to the next town in China. They don't let people freely cross there, I guess for a security thing for weapons or drugs or whatever, because obviously a lot of stuff could get smuggled in between these countries. So the food in the country is good. After being in India, India's obviously got amazing food too, but there's much more places where it's more vegetarian with some meat. Pakistan is more meat. So if you're like me and you're cycling and you like a lot of meat, that's great. Obviously, there's not a ton of nightlife and stuff like that. You know, you can imagine there's not really alcohol in any of these places. So, you know, I just usually hang out in my hotel room. I wouldn't really drink in public or anything like that. I mean, I remember one time in a hotel, I was like in the common area, and the guy's like, maybe you should go to your room and drink that because, you know, that could be offensive to some people. So in some Islamic countries, it's not that they don't drink alcohol. They also don't like to see people drink alcohol, maybe because it's a bad influence on other people. So I'm not sure why they cared if I drank, but because to me, I'm just that kind of American individualistic, like, oh, I should have a beer if I want, but some people might get offended. Don't do it, you know, do it in your room or whatever, or like in the Hunza Valley, it's fine, or in the bigger cities maybe. But anyway, I thought it was really cool. You know, as I said, India was a little annoying. India's amazing, but it was a little bit annoying. In Pakistan, they don't get the tourism, so they were much more laid back and super friendly. And I thought it was a great experience. Definitely recommend the Karakorum Highway. I mean, it is super beautiful. And yeah, if you're going to do, you know, all of these amazing mountains in the world, you definitely can't miss that. So I hope this video was entertaining for you. I'll have some more cool videos about the Middle East and all these other places I went in Africa and South America coming up in the next few weeks. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more content. My channel has a lot of different stuff from my travels around the world, whether hiking or biking, and some of the things over the years I've done, whether I was in the military, commercial fishing in Alaska, or my experience living in China and Taiwan for 15 years, and I was a teacher there and led tours and did all kinds of stuff. So if that stuff's beneficial for you or entertaining, subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers.
فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا